Looking for a little strange.
Welcome back, dear strangers. You're listening to Strange Bluegrass, and I am SB Pearce, your host for all things weird and wacky about Kentucky. I have an exciting episode for you today. I am here with Kyle Kadel with the International Paranormal Museum in Somerset, Kentucky. He's located in the basement of the Cooper Community Arts Center, and I've been looking forward to this forever and ever and ever, and I'm so glad that I get to share this with you. Hi, Kyle.
Hey, how's it
How are you
going?
doing?
So well.
We actually met, but we're going to play along.
Yeah, hello.
So, Kyle, so we've chatted a little bit before when I got here. You're not originally from here, but you've been here for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
How did you even get started in the beginning with paranormal until leading up to this?
Originally I'm from Chicago. I was born, but my great-grandmother was from the county. And so when my grandmother died, my mom moved us down here, so it was like a homecoming.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always kind of felt connected to the area, and this is where I've grown up, and this is really what I call home, you know? And it's the natural place for me to open the museum because it's where I am, you know? But in high school, it's a very small town we're in. In high school, most people, you know, drank or partied or whatever, and I wasn't really like that. Me and my friends would always look for entertaining things to do, unusual things to do. And when I was in high school is when all the shows like Ghost Hunters and stuff started.
Right.
So living in a small town with not much to do, we're watching these shows saying, oh, this is crap, we don't believe in this. And the one thing we have in abundance is cemeteries, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So me and my friends just start going out and looking for proof of some of the stuff that we didn't believe in that we're watching on TV. And it took about 3 months before we got enough evidence for ourselves to completely turn around on that. I still don't, you know, I'd still rather believe that something's normal than not normal, but I call myself an open skeptic. And more than trying to prove or disprove any of this stuff, I just love collecting the stories and the folklore attached to it all, you know?
Right.
And so I started ghost hunting in about 2004, almost 20 years ago now. A few years into ghost hunting, once on a ghost hunt here in downtown Somerset, we saw a UFO. And so that kind of opened us up into other possibilities of weirdness. And by now I'll accept it all. You know, anything, even a little bit weird. One of my pet passions is like miracle waters. And I've been all over the country to these different miracle water sources that God has told people to drink and it's cured them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So like, I think we cover a little bit of everything here. I'm also naturally a pretty big tourist. So once I started really getting into this stuff and going on vacation, I would plan all my trips around, you know, the Patterson-Gimlin site where the Bigfoot footage was filmed in the 60s,
Okay.
or New Orleans for voodoo stuff. I started planning all of my trips around these weird places in America and beyond to kind of just go into this stuff. And I've been able to collect so many artifacts from these different towns and places we've been able to investigate. And about 7 years ago, we approached the art center here about doing a Halloween display just for a couple months in their lobby. And they said, yeah, you can do that, but also we have space to rent if you want to do a full-time thing. And so that's kind of the story of how we started in this building. This building, when it was the library, was the first open building that ever let me and my team ghost hunt in. And it was always really important to us, because it had a special point in our hearts. It was the library growing up, so I have memories of playing on the third floor. They had this giant tree sculpture that you'd climb and read books in. And like, I have all these memories of being here, and that's why we wanted to start or have a display. And when they offered us like a permanent space, I was like, absolutely, like, why not do that? And it felt like coming full circle with some of the weirdness stuff that we've done.
Right.
And that was in 2017, October 14, 2017. So this year we're celebrating our 6-year anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's very, very cool. Now, you were telling me that you recently had a particular online presence come see you a couple months ago?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started the museum in 2017, my first bit of social media that we did was started a Roadside America page. And Roadside America is like the best resource for people that travel and want to see weird things. And it's not just paranormal. They cover, you know, the kind of Route 66 lifestyle of like the giant ball of twine and a muffler man that's 20 feet tall and stuff like that.
Yeah, all the quirky. I always check it out when we're about to travel.
Exactly.
Like, we gotta go look at this weird thing over here.
Exactly. I've always loved the website, and that's the first social media presence we had. And about 3 or 4 months ago, we had Ken, who's the senior editor of Roadside America, stop by and visit us and do a full interview with me. And we're actually lucky enough to be named the site of the week for Roadside America.
That's incredible.
So yeah, so many people have visited us because of that. And not only did that happen, but Ken, the senior editor, donated a Christmas card from John Wayne Gacy that has like some artwork on it and like his price list and a poem that he wrote from the point of view of Santa.
Oh,
And so that all came from Ken coming too, and that's one of the coolest pieces we have now. So.
oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So would you like to show me some of your favorite pieces or most popular pieces here in the museum? I'm not gonna share everything with you because you need to come visit.
Yeah, and
See
we
how
have
that
like
works,
1,200 items. So.
Yeah. But I'll do a quick sweep, but you're gonna have to come to get up close to get the details, and I'll show you. He's gonna show us his favorite things, and then I'm gonna show you some of the things I've noticed since I've gotten here. But then you're just gonna have to come visit Kyle here at the museum. So.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Well, I'll start with this lady behind us here.
I'm gonna move this piece.
So this is a Fiji mermaid. She's 3 feet tall, and she is a gaff prop, which is like in the tradition of P.T. Barnum, where a gaff prop basically means it's as real as it can be without being real.
Okay.
So this gaff prop was made by an artist named Juan Cabano. Juan is the Fiji mermaid artist. If you've ever been to Ripley's, if you've seen their Fiji mermaids, he's made it. He's made all of the Fiji mermaids for all of the Ripley's locations and stuff.
Okay.
And he made this lady for us. She's about 3 feet tall, and she's made with real fish scales and fish fins and fish teeth and everything, based around a mold that he made. The original Fiji mermaid was a monkey tied to the bottom of a fish, or like sewn to the bottom of a fish.
Okay.
So this is a little bit different than that, but this is all actual body, like animal parts and everything.
Okay. Do you happen to know if he uses any kind of bone structure? So like 1,000 years from now, they dig this up and they're going, whoa, what did we just find?
Yeah, there's a small little, this is all like on purpose aging, and there's a tiny hole in there where you can actually see one of the bones that he's used for the rib cage here.
Okay.
So yeah, and he's also done, right over here, this is another piece he's done that there's only 12 of these in creation, and it's made kind of the same way, where it's all like actual fish and everything.
Let me fix this, guys. Let me see.
But he
is.
So he is a creature of the Black Lagoon here, made from Juan, and he's one of 12, and it's the same artist here that made the mermaid. But this one's incredibly unique because it's based on the universal monster creature, the Black Lagoon, not a gaff prop of a supposed cryptid.
Right.
So this one, he really got to show his more work, his more artistry than just trying to make a fake,
Right.
And so it's one of my absolute favorite pieces that he's ever done, and we're very lucky to have it here.
The detail is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's terrifying, kind of,
Yeah, the teeth are what's getting me, because, yeah, I mean, I suppose you could make those from a plasticine or something, but yeah, using the real teeth, that's really something.
Yeah.
Okay. Where shall we go next?
Do you want to check it over at the Mothman case here?
Of
So
course.
we are in Kentucky, in Appalachia here, one of the most famous cryptids from Appalachia is the Mothman of Point Pleasant, West Virginia. He's been seen all over. A lot of people actually think he's the same creature that the Native Americans refer to as a thunderbird. But he got his name in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in 66 and 67. There was a 14-month period where the small town of Point Pleasant had over 100 eyewitness sightings of this 6.5-foot tall winged flying Garuda creature that had glowing red eyes. And one of the newspaper reporters covering the phenomena nicknamed him the Mothman, which is the name of a villain from the Batman comics back then.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, he which is pretty apt for how he's often depicted now, and even the original eyewitness sketches. But it's definitely added to the mythos of how we believe the Mothman looks.
Okay.
Is this silly name that someone gave. And what's interesting too is a lot of people refer to him as more of a bat-like creature, and obviously they couldn't call him Batman, but they named him a villain of Batman, you know? So I think that that's kind of interesting. My absolute favorite piece we have is in the story of the Mothman. The sightings in Point Pleasant, West Virginia kind of end on December 15th, 1967, when the bridge collapsed in the area. So Point Pleasant is right on the Ohio River across from Gallipolis, Ohio, and there's a giant bridge that connected the two towns. And in 67, it was far overtaxed on use. It was made in the 40s, I believe, and almost immediately was overused for what it was built for. And in December of 67, it was crowded with traffic of Christmas shoppers and stuff. And there's a red light at the West Virginia end of it. So it's literally backed up and full of traffic. And on December 15th, while it's backed up with traffic, it collapsed and 43 people perished in the collapse. In the aftermath, a few people said that they saw the Mothman climbing around on it. Some people saw some men in black climbing around on it a few days before. The only thing we really know is that it had a structural failure. We don't know exactly what it was caused by, except for overuse, you know?
Right.
But we were actually lucky enough. That's kind of the exclamation point at the end of the Mothman sightings in Point Pleasant. Everyone was paying attention to these Mothman sightings. Like I said, there's over 100 eyewitness reports to the newspaper and to the police. And then all of a sudden, the community has this horrible tragedy, so they're not worried about a monster. They're worried about real life there. And so it's intrinsically tied to the Mothman story. And we were actually lucky enough to have someone that was a fan of the museum donate an actual piece of the bridge. It's one of the concrete support beams. He knew the family that owned the property that the bridge was sitting on, and was allowed to go out there about 10 years ago and actually found a piece of the concrete support beam. So he donated to us. That's my absolute favorite piece. It may visually be not as interesting as some of the others, but with the history attached to it, it is by far my favorite piece we have in the museum.
That is an incredible story, because I think I've only really watched like the film and read a little bit about it, and then it is intriguing.
Yeah, it's one of the most interesting stories just because of the sheer number of eyewitness reports. Like the town of Point Pleasant had 8,000 people in it, and it's a small community and in the 60s especially, you didn't say things that were out of the ordinary to draw attention to yourself.
Right. No,
and the idea that over 100 of these local citizens reported in 13 or 14 months seeing this creature, and not just reported it, but told the police, like went out of their way to file police reports, went out of their way to talk to Mary Heyer, who's the main journalist that wrote about the creature.
Okay.
And so it's truly fascinating to think that they took this much time out of their very normal lives in West Virginia to dedicate to something that is unbelievable, basically, for all these people.
Right. Well, and there's got to be truth in numbers as far as, especially when you think about that time period when saying something like that just out of the blue could get you some serious medication or a long vacation somewhere.
Exactly.
People were not as open about their experiences back then as they are today because they would encounter tons of ridicule, kind of like the folks down in Hopkinsville with the Kelly Green men and stuff like that ended up being ruinous for them, even though they had a phenomenal experience.
Exactly. So. And especially, I like to think about the year of 1967 as a whole, where, out in Bluff Creek, California, they're filming the most famous Bigfoot footage we still have today,
right.
Patty footage of her walking. And then we're doing the Summer of Love in San Francisco, where all of a sudden all these human beings are thinking about things in a spiritual sense instead of a physical way, and meditating and trying to bring world peace and everything. At the same time, a Bigfoot's being captured, and a Mothman is making a bridge fall in West Virginia. Like, it was physically psychically such a strange time for America.
It really was. I've done a ton of research into UFO sightings, especially in Kentucky. Everything from crop circles to major crashes, plane crashes and stuff, just here in our own state. And a lot of them seem to be around those 50s and 60s, kind of. Maybe some newer stuff, but there was a lot more back then. And I don't think it was national pandemonium.
No. And really, the Grays Harbor, or not Grays Harbor, I can't remember the name of the UFO incident that happened the same year as Roswell in the 40s, but it was really the first instance of a human seeing a flying saucer, and it kind of gotten forgot about for about 15 years, and then in the beginning of the 60s, with sci-fi and stuff like that, it suddenly kicked up and led to this giant wave of seeing UFOs across America,
Right. Because of course, there's always room to say, well, once you plant the seed of the idea, but it's also, but maybe they weren't looking or seeing, because I was a photographer for years, and a lot of people will drive by something incredibly beautiful every day and never even see it.
Exactly.
So it's maybe it alerted them to pay better of attention and to question what they're seeing.
Yeah, and I forget the name of the phenomena, but when you learn a new word, a word that's new to you, all of a sudden you start hearing that word all the time in use. And it's not that it's being used any more than before you learned it, but you had a personal recognition with the word, and now you are hearing it everywhere.
Exactly.
So it's the same kind of idea to me about people aren't looking for something that's out of the ordinary until they hear about it, and they're like, well, maybe I'll keep my eyes open. So they open themselves up to see these things.
Right. I have some personal experience. And probably the most common is not just the word, but when you buy a vehicle and you think you've gotten this, cool looking car that you hadn't really paid attention to, but then all of a sudden everybody has that car, and you're putting your key in the wrong doorknob or whatever. Yeah. Same thing.
I can't remember the name of that phenomenon, but it's a well-studied thing that we have almost a biased blindness to things that don't speak to us until they speak to us, you know? And so it's really kind of fascinating to think that, sure, if you give the idea of there's these things in the sky that look like flying saucers, then you may influence people to see it. We run into that a lot with EVP sessions with ghost hunting, where you record a voice of something talking that's not talking, that you can hear in person, but when you play back the recorder, you can hear it. And it's usually not very clear, but it might say 3 syllables and you can't tell what it is, but then someone says, oh, it says Jason is here, and then the only thing you can hear is Jason is here.
Exactly.
So you have to be, conscious of these, automatic biases that we have with that, but also that idea opens it up. You don't know what you're looking for until you know what it is, And so it really opens up the idea that it's not just a blindness bias, it's a new revelation to yourself that you never could have saw before that. You
Right.
know?
Right. No, that's definitely true. I think, and I think we do that not even with the more supernatural or paranormal of things. We do it with everyday,
Exactly.
and you can really see it in kids.
Yeah.
Like, like if it does not impact them directly, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, you hear a song a million times, but then the first time you actually listen to it and enjoy it, you start hearing it regularly.
Right.
Know?
Right.
And so it's just fascinating to think that we do need, well, it's the same idea that zoos need to introduce you to these animals so that you can care about their conservation.
Right.
Like logically, like intellectually, you can think, oh, there's an endangered species out there, and that's not right. But then if you actually see a member of this endangered species in front of you, you have a personal connection with it, and you want to actually help conserve it.
Right.
And that's exactly the same phenomena that zoos and conservation clubs work on. You know?
Right. Right. That's a great point. So what else should we look at today?
Well, this room is actually my favorite that we're in right now. It's the more monster, alien, high strangeness room.
I'm going to get a room shot here.
Yeah.
I don't have a bajillion fans, but they are quite well aware of my low production value. So, I mean, this is hundreds.
This room covers several of the cryptids, and you know we are in Kentucky, so a lot of our focus is on Kentucky monsters and legends and stuff. But we're also the International Paranormal Museum, so we try to cover things from all over the world. We have pieces from the Loch Ness gift shop. We have funny souvenirs from all around England and stuff about just some of these different legends. But a lot of what we have focuses on places that I've been. Like, this is not only a paranormal museum, but this is a museum that I built myself on my own travels and my own education.
That's
and
wonderful.
So it kind of is a mirror to how I think about high strangeness.
Right.
You know?
And so every piece has a personal connected story.
Exactly. Yeah. We a lot of these pieces I've just spent the last 20 years of my life traveling and collecting. Several of them have been donated since we've opened the museum. Like I said, the piece of the bridge has, but that's because people have seen the museum and recognize a part of themselves in it and want to help keep it alive.
Yeah. So now I had a refreshing drink. Do you want to talk about this for a second?
Yeah.
Because I have actually heard of this very, very spring.
Yeah. So one of my favorite things we've been able to offer this since we've opened is that we, of course, give out water for any patrons that want it. But not just any water, because we are the Paranormal Museum. As I mentioned earlier, I really love the idea of miracle water sources. And about 3 hours, 2.5 hours away from the museum is a place called Houston's Mineral Water. It's in Newmarket, Tennessee, about 20 minutes outside of Knoxville. And the story of this place is it actually began in the 30s. There's a guy named Bill Houston that owned a general store and some property. And Bill went to the doctor because he wasn't feeling good, and he was diagnosed with kidney failure. The doctor said, there's nothing really we can do for you. Just, we'll try to keep you comfortable. And Bill went home that day, kind of dejected, and fell asleep in his chair and had a vision from an angel saying, Bill, you're not going to die. What we need you to do is walk out on your property to this specific spot and dig exactly 252 feet down. Once you're down there, you'll find water, drink the water, and it'll cure you. So Bill got up the next day and hired someone to dig a well in exactly where the voice told him to go. They hit water twice on the way down, and he capped it off, and at exactly 252 feet, like the voice said, he hit another reservoir of water. And started drinking it and lived another, I think, 22 years after.
Oh, wow.
So Bill quickly realized he was cured and started packaging the water and selling it to people as Houston's Miracle Water. And he has testimonials from all over the country where people have said that it cured their rheumatoid arthritis, it cured their sick pets, it cured their kidney disease, their liver failure, all this sorts of stuff. But of course, this is in the 30s, right around when the FDA decided to start cracking down on miracle cures.
Right.
And so the government sued Bill. They said you cannot just call your water Houston's miracle water. And so they took him to court, and he showed up in court with enough individual testimonials of people that have been cured from the water that they decided to throw the case out. They still made him change the water. He changed the name of the water to Houston's Mineral Water instead of Miracle Water.
Yeah.
But he didn't have to pay anything because he had so much overwhelming support from satisfied customers all around the world. So,
Right.
His grandson now runs the well. It's still in the same place, and it's still this tiny well house that runs on the honor system. You can go there with your own jug and fill it up at the water, and there's a box to leave 50 cents per gallon.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I found out about Houston's on TikTok.
Yeah.
Somebody had posted a video and they'd gone there and they filled their water jug and they said it was the best water and it was pretty tasty.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie.
It's so good. The first time I ever went there was a family that was filling up 30, 40 gallons worth of it while we were there.
Yeah.
And I noticed when they opened their trunk to get water bottles out, there was like a very sophisticated wheelchair in there. And eventually I got to talking to them, and they have a son that I believe had multiple sclerosis
Okay.
and MS, and muscular dystrophy. It was something that
Right.
affected his motor skills, and it was bad enough that he was nonverbal for a while.
Okay.
And they had tried everything and went to doctors their whole life, and kind of in a last resort, decided to start putting him on this water.
Right.
And they had put him on the water about 6 months before I'd met him, and he had became verbal in that time.
Oh, wow.
And they said that there was a noticeable difference in him, so much so that now not only is that not all the water that he drinks and they cook for him with, but they bathe him in it too.
Okay.
And so they were completely sold on it, and I've had several people come through the museum and try it and say that it's helped them feel better. I recommend them going down there for a full supply,
Right.
But yeah, I've actually gotten to meet Bill, the grandson of the original Bill Houston, and he told me a fascinating story about before he ran it, his uncle ran it in the 70s, and one day he was going out to close up the well house, and there was a UFO flying over it. And the unique thing about this UFO is that it was like a disc shape, but it had a light that was like electric blue that almost looked like a heartbeat monitor underneath it. It wasn't like it was a fluid light, it wasn't static, that kept on changing. And so he watched it for about 30 seconds and then shined his flashlight on it. And as soon as he shined the flashlight on it, it like shot off and in about a second flew to where he couldn't see it any longer towards Knoxville. So
I can move my light. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just being rude.
Yeah, sorry guys.
Here, I'll go move this out of the way and we'll try to make it look professional as I walk over here. We'll put this out of the way. Okay. So let's take a walk around. Where else should we go?
Well, like I said, this is my favorite room of the museum. It covers all the aliens and has our miracle water. The only other thing I'll specifically point out in this is our far case of Bigfoot prints. These are all found in the state of Kentucky.
Okay.
These middle two are actually the only two originals we have in the museum. Everything else is a copy of the footprints that were found.
Okay.
But these two are the actual castings that were made in the field. If you notice all the grass and leaves and everything in them. These were made actually here in Pulaski County in May of 2007.
Okay.
We have a very large man-made lake here called Lake Cumberland.
Okay.
And it's laked by the Wolf Creek Dam. And in the mid-2000s, the dam was cracked. So they lowered all of the water to fix it. And so Lake Cumberland had a lot of areas that were not covered by water that usually are. And in one of these areas, for about a 3-month period, Bigfoot prints were found repeatedly and a creature was seen in the area.
Okay.
So my friend Thomas, that runs the Northern Kentucky Bigfoot organization, came down and actually found some footprints and made these original castings and donated them to us.
Oh, wow.
He's made all of the castings in this case. The coolest, most unique one we have is up here at top. We actually call it the telecast. And that's because it is a cast of fingers that was made from a jar of Nutella that they left out in a Bigfoot trap.
Oh.
So they had created this thing with PVC pipe and snags that was, the purpose of it was the Nutella was the bait, and they wanted the creature to reach into the thing to grab Nutella and have the snares snag some of his hair.
Okay.
And so they built the whole thing, left it in an area where they've had Bigfoot encounters, and came back a few days later. And number one, it didn't work. Something had just destroyed the entire trap.
Right.
And so they're trying to pick up all the pieces, and flung way far from the original place that the trap was set was the jar of Nutella, the bait.
Okay.
And so they go and pick it up, and they notice the top's been put on askew. Mm-hmm. And so they open it, and something gets scooped a bunch out. So they had a cooler with them. They immediately froze it, and when they got home, they made a casting out of the frozen jar of Nutella. And that's what you see here, and there's obviously giant fingers that are reached in. There's even a spot for fingernails in this casting. And those are I have rather large fingers, and they are massive compared to mine.
Right.
You know?
They are.
That is a one-of-a-kind cast that there have been a few hand casts made by Bigfoot researchers, but there's absolutely never been a trap of Nutella that has ever
right. Well, I'm going to say Nutella's delicious, so I'm going to totally dig into it too.
Yeah, of course, even Bigfoot likes it.
Yeah. I know. I was trying to reach out a couple years ago. It was probably pre-COVID. There is a Bigfoot researcher out in Eastern Kentucky in Groton, and the local paper had done a story, and I was trying so hard. Maybe they didn't think that I was serious. I wasn't messaging them to mock them in any way. I would truly wanted to come because they do have castings from right there around them in Eastern Kentucky too. So yeah, maybe your show will help me.
Yeah.
Be like, let me come see you.
Yeah, we take it seriously. We promise.
Yeah. Well, what's in this room over here?
So our back room here is actually called the Spook Show, the Ghost Night Spook Show, and this is created by my friend Jonathan Brinson in kind of a collaboration. So Jonathan's forte is making these incredibly detailed figures here. Right. He'll purchase a mask and hands and then make an entire body for him. And he started this about 7 years ago, or probably about 9 years ago now, making just Halloween displays. And he does the outside of our building every year. He does an incredible job of it. But we wanted people to see it a little bit more than just, for 2 weeks of the year. And so we've actually been able to make room for a full-time spook show set up back here. So everything you see are props that he's created. One of the coolest things, in my opinion, is the Doom machine that he's made back here. I think he made this out of an old computer terminal from a school.
Oh gosh.
Has just designed everything himself here. So it looks like Dr. Acula here is performing some weird experiments.
Love it.
Everything he's done here came out of his own imagination. And we're lucky enough to have a full-time display of this stuff. The funny thing is we call it Halloween all year round. However, during actual Halloween, it's not here because it's on the outside of the building.
Right.
So this is Halloween 24/7 except during Halloween.
Right. This is wonderful. His work is gorgeous.
Yeah, he has really gone above and beyond with some of this stuff.
Look at this guy.
He adds a new creature, a new display every few months to it. So
nice. These are fabulous. Okay, and what's this room up ahead of us over here?
So we'll walk through the monster room here again to the first room you enter at the museum. This room is kind of the oddities and death room.
Okay.
So this stuff is the least paranormal, quote unquote, that we cover. We have a lot of death artifacts and funeral artifacts. The biggest piece in here is this wicker casket we actually have that's from the late 1800s, and this was actually used as a viewing casket for Confederate soldiers in Tennessee. No one was ever buried in it, but there were several different soldiers that were laid in it for the viewings.
Okay.
There's actually still a little bit of blood up at the top.
Oh,
here. So
nice.
this is kind of the most commanding piece when you walk in. It's what gets your
Right.
attention,
That's a
you know?
phenomenal piece to have. Look at that. Look at that wicker. Oh,
And
that's
then
cool.
it's covered with a veil. So the 1800s was kind of the birth of kind of formaldehyde and preserving bodies. Before that, they just put them, in a casket in the ground. The first most famous person that was actually preserved was Abraham Lincoln. And so this is actually a weird story. The best doctors at the time embalmed him, and they buried him after he was on display for like 3 days for the national funeral. And then about 20 years later, they actually dug him up and moved where he was. And when they did that, they checked on his embalming, and he still was not showing any signs of decay or anything after 20 years. And so they moved him and they reinterred him. And then about 20 or 30 years after that, they did it again, and they moved him to his final resting place where he is now. And it wasn't until that last time that the first signs of decay were showing on his body.
Isn't that amazing?
It's so weird because especially there wasn't electricity back then. The way you drained the body was you hooked up a tube to their veins and let gravity drain it down.
Right.
And then you had bottles that hung here full of formaldehyde that you let gravity drain into his body.
Okay, so kind of like the formaldehyde was pushing the blood through.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
And so this is an embalming machine from the 70s, which made it a lot easier. This one did both the extraction and the insertion of the formaldehyde. So it would fill up the tank with the body fluid, you'd empty it, and then you would fill the tank up with formaldehyde and then put it in that way. But they didn't have anything like that back then. They literally did it all manually. And just the idea that Mr. Lincoln was so preserved for over 50 years that it's kind of unreal,
Right.
Yeah, so this is kind of our, death. We begin at the end at the museum, It's kind of our death room. Over here behind you is our serial killer wall. We have several different things from John Wayne Gacy and the Zodiac Killer and H.H. Holmes and Charles Manson. We have a lot of the grossest thing in the entire museum are toenail clippings from Charles Manson here. He sent them to a woman that was a fan he had correspondence with while he was in prison. After he passed away, she sold them to a collector, and that's how we got them.
It is the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, who needs flowers?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
But yeah, how bizarre. Beard clippings and toenail clippings.
Oh, wow.
And then we have just
this is suitable. I mean, he did grow up in
Kentucky.
Kentucky.
In Ashland. We've actually had someone come through the museum once that was from Ashland, and their father told them a story about how there was one gas station where everyone hung out with. Ashland was a very small town, so there's a gas station where everyone hung out with, including this woman's father, and he was there one day. And one of his buddies that he was hanging out with said, "Oh, my friend Crazy Charlie's in town. We're going to hang out with him. Do you want to come with us?" And this woman's father's like, "Yeah, sure." And this guy just pulls up in a car, and he doesn't know it. He's not famous at the time, but it's Charles Manson. Just this guy's friend, Crazy Charlie. He gets in the car with Crazy Charlie and said that Crazy Charlie just drove so unhinged that he almost immediately got out of the car and didn't hang out with him for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I love that story,
Yeah.
He didn't trust this guy just based on his driving, and then years later sees him on the news.
Right. Well, that tells you always listen to that gut instinct. Maybe if your gut's saying get out of the car, you should probably go. So what's this next room over here?
Yeah, and then we have our kind of ghost hunting haunted room here.
Ooh.
We go ahead and pause the audio on this. And so this room is also our library here, but it kind of covers all of our ghost hunting equipment and several examples of different things we've used in the field.
Okay. So what are these right here?
So in this case, we have a lot of our ghost hunting equipment. These two pieces right here are different versions of one of the most popular pieces of ghost hunting equipment, and it's called a spirit box. Spirit box is basically a device that's an AM/FM radio that is programmed to scan quickly through radio stations. The point of it's not to listen to the radio; it's to produce white noise. White noise is basically just the static that you hear. And it's just a blank noise that the theory is spirits can manipulate to speak easier. That there's been a lot of evidence that if you add an electronic element like an audio recorder or something, that spirits or ghosts or whatever you're trying to communicate with can manipulate that a little bit easier than just talking to you, appearing and talking to you.
Okay.
And so we've used spirit boxes for a while, and we've had a lot of interesting results with it. But one of the kind of negatives with it is that, as we talked about earlier, if you ask a question and you're all listening to the same static and hear something, one of the investigators might say, it sounds like I'm here. And once someone vocalizes I'm here, you can't hear anything outside of that.
Right.
And a lot of times you've asked a question like, is there anyone here? And then someone says, oh, it sounds like it says I'm here. So that completely colors your vision of what it says.
Right.
So one of our favorite ways to actually use spirit boxes is called the Estes method. It was created by a couple of our investigator friends, Carl and Connor, that worked for the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. So what they'll do, if you notice we have a blindfold next to our spirit box, what they'll do is designate one person as like the conduit, the channel, basically, that's listening to the spirit box. They'll put in noise canceling headphones and then put on a blindfold and then sit in the room with you all. So let's say it's 3 people. One of them is this, so they effectively are blind and deaf to everything that you're saying. All they can hear is the static from the spirit box.
Okay.
And then the other 2 investigators will start asking questions. And whenever the person listening to the spirit box hears something, they're just to repeat it. They're not to like try to interpret it or like see if it answers the questions or anything. They're just to repeat any voice that they hear, any words that they hear. So it's basically a blind study where they can't hear the questions being asked. As investigators, we're asking questions, and sometimes the conduit will give an answer that directly answers the questions when they're completely unable to hear them.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more of a, I
controlled,
hesitate to use the word scientific, but yeah,
scientifically controlled,
controlled experiment to where their own biases and their own want to find evidence isn't going to interfere with what's coming through.
Right.
You know?
Okay.
And so when we do that and find answers that kind of coincide with the questions we're asking, it has a lot more weight in this world than one of us just ask or like saying, yeah, I think it answered our question.
Right,
you know?
right.
So it's called the Estes method. It's very, it's like revolutionary for using a basic piece of ghost hunting equipment.
Right.
And that's really what we like, is that a lot of the equipment is made, I mean, very few pieces of equipment are made for ghost hunting because that all works on theories. You know, even when I started ghost hunting, 19 years ago, I started out looking for ghosts, which in my mind were the spirits of people that once were living on this world and are not now, but they're here and can interact. And there's so many presumptions like that you make when you start out. Like, the longer we've been doing this, the more I realize I have no idea what I'm trying to do.
Right.
I can't tell you if a ghost is the spirit of someone that used to interact with us, or if it's someone in another dimension and we're just in a thin spot between the 2 dimensions, or is it just an imprint of energy that someone is still alive but they expelled a lot of energy in this area and we've picked up on that.
Right.
There's so many just presumptions you make when you start ghost hunting that once you start thinking about it just don't make sense.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so we like to use any of the equipment in ways that are new, you know, because it's all just experiments, you know. One of my favorite pieces of ghost hunting over here is called the Dandy, nicknamed the Dandy. This was made by a husband and wife ghost hunting equipment, or ghost hunting team in northern Kentucky that make their own equipment. And this is basically a call and response vehicle. A lot of ghost hunting is asking for questions and then having it respond. So even that has a lot of presumptions that what I'm talking to speaks English, and what I'm talking to has enough energy to respond to me and understands me and all this stuff. And so this kind of takes some of that away to where it's just like interaction without words.
Okay.
Each one of these pendulums is attached to a sensor, and when you move them, they make a different tone. And so we've set this up on investigations, have asked things to move these, or have moved them ourselves and have the same ones moved after we've moved them.
So like a
Exactly.
call and repeat.
Exactly. So it's not something that, like, we do sometimes ask questions and say this one's for yes, this one's for no, and stuff like that. But a lot of times it's just experimenting to see, I mean, what if these energies aren't even human energies? They're animals, and an animal can fully understand if you push this and it makes that sound.
Oh gosh,
you know?
yeah.
So we like to set it up and not have those presumptions of, yeah, we're talking to an American spirit that speaks English and blah blah blah.
True.
You know, and so we have used it in ghost hunting, but full time it's just set up in the museum.
Yeah.
And Hannah that works here has led so many different tours of the museum, and while she's in another room or in here, not nowhere close to this, it starts going off.
Okay.
And so it's just a fun thing for, it's one of the few interactive pieces we have in the museum where obviously anyone can come and push this,
Right.
you know, but we've had people come and do that and have spiritual activity respond with it. You know?
Okay.
It's set here with our haunted and cursed objects here, and so that's kind of why it's in this location, to kind of not only help you interact with what we have here, but put you in the mindset of that these are, if living's not the right word, these are intelligent energies that aren't just like, this isn't just a zoo where people can come in and see these trapped spirits and stuff. This is a place where we have a reverence for whatever has happened, and we have a respect for these energies, and you can come interact with them, you know?
Now, have you had any visitors that got maybe came into this room and they freaked out?
Yeah, even if we don't talk to people about the fact that everything that we believe is haunted or cursed or has an active energy is in this room, not in the other rooms here. And even if we don't talk about that with someone, we have a vast majority of people that come in that say this room specifically makes them uncomfortable.
Right.
And one of the pieces that does that the most for people is our leprechaun here, John Jameson. And John is a cursed leprechaun. A brief version of his history is he was made by the Brooklyn Toy Company and distributed from a brewery that was giving them out as promotional items for St. Patrick's Day.
Okay.
And so he ended up in a bar in Manhattan that, to be honest, the bar was probably already on its last legs, on its way out of business. But after they got John, everything bad that happened, they blamed on him jokingly. You know?
Yeah.
And so the bar closed several months after John became part of the family, and the owner of the bar kept him as like a souvenir, you know. And he was still in the owner's car. He was in the owner's car for like a month or so, and the owner got into a massive car wreck and was in the hospital.
Okay.
And so he's in the hospital talking to one of his employees that came and visit him, and he made a joke about, yeah, it must have been John Jameson. And that employee ended up taking John Jameson from the guy's stuff. And he's like, oh, don't worry, I got it for you. And then within a month, that guy was in the hospital for a severe illness. And so from the original bar owner to me, there have been 8 separate owners, and every single owner has either gotten into a car wreck or has gotten a severe illness from him.
Okay.
The guy that I got him from was 43 and had a stroke a month after he came into possession of John. And
now, does he seem to only correlate to owners of people who have had them in their possession, or
not just owners, but until me, yes. And so I got him. I think things are a little bit different with us because I don't say that I'm his owner. We are, co-workers basically.
Yeah.
This is his home. If John wants something, I'll bring it to you, buddy. I don't think of him as an object. I think of him as a guest,
Right.
And so when I got him on a Tuesday, and my birthday was Thursday, and I got food poisoning for the first time in my life. I was sick in bed for 3 days.
Oh gosh.
Everything else that he's done, I feel like that's pretty mild.
Right.
And I won't say it's him exactly, but it was a pretty strong correlation. And we've had people that come in. We explain his history. And a lot of people will jokingly mess with him or well, why don't you come and haunt me? And we've had one guy specifically who drove his, I think, week-old Camaro to the museum and was having a great time and really enjoyed being here. And then we told him the story about John. He's like, well, you better not wreck my Camaro, and then picked on him a little bit.
Oh no.
And when he left, he made it out of our parking lot about a half mile up the road before he took his vehicle. So
see, I mean, now would you, if in the living room, would you like it if somebody came up and just started messing with you? You wouldn't like that. You're not gonna like that on the other side either.
Exactly. So I think it's kind of interesting. We obviously warn everyone, but the way that I think about this stuff is I do think that there's energies attached to these haunted and cursed objects, but I think a lot of it is just a mirror of that energy you put into it.
Right.
And that's what it feeds off of. I think that we have all this ghost hunting equipment on display, but I don't think any of it is as important as you. It's the same idea if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, doesn't make a sound.
Right.
You are integral for that sound to be made. It has to be heard.
Right.
And so it's the same thing with ghost hunting. It's a reflection of what you put into it. A ghost won't walk through this room just every day at 8 p.m. But if someone's here and their energy says it's going to happen, it could happen. You know? And I think that the most important part, I think that all paranormal stuff happens. I think some of it happens in the physical world, but I don't think any of it could happen if there wasn't a human mind to experience it,
Right.
And so even things like you see an animal get freaked out by something that you can't see, the animal is there. It could be anyone, not just a human that wants to see a ghost. It could be anyone there, and a certain a specific setup of how they feel or how they're ready to interact with the world is what leads this phenomenon to show up.
Right.
I also kind of think that a lot of the paranormal stuff, ghosts and Bigfoot and aliens, a lot of it I think may be the same entity that just, if this person was grown up their whole lives and believed in angels, this entity might show itself as an angel to this person.
Right, the ability to shift and
exactly. Yeah, and to
like
what
a
makes sense to
multifaceted
you, like the observer, if you don't have any personal connection with a robot, this thing showing up as a robot isn't going to mean something to you. If you your whole life have believed in fairies and this thing shows up as a fairy, that's going to be a lot more meaningful of an experience for you, and you are the main part of the paranormal phenomenon happening. It's happening for you. So I think that you are absolutely an integral part in it. I think that Bigfoots and ghosts and aliens may all be the same intelligence, just showing up in different ways, and in the different ways that people are ready to see it. You know? So I think that it's all, when I started out, like I said, it was a lot more cut and dry of what I was looking for and what I wasn't looking for. But now I think that it's all the same thing with different names, and even the inspiration you get from, Bob Dylan says that he's never written a single one of those songs himself, that all of those songs come from somewhere else and is channeled through him. And so I think that that's just as paranormal. That's just as much of a weird phenomena as me going into a house at night and seeing a spirit, you know?
Right.
I think it's the same energy, you know?
Well, Stephen King says something similar about writing, that the stories are already out there. You have to go find them and get them.
Exactly. And that's how I think of a lot of this stuff, you know, is that, like, of course this thing's going to show up to you as the ghost of a colonial soldier, because what else would it show up to you as, you know?
Right.
Like, that's the only thing that your mind would be able to make sense of it, you know?
Right.
Like, if it showed up as Santa, that wouldn't make sense to you, so.
Right. True.
But yeah, so this room is kind of the collection of, this is kind of where we started. It's our equipment, our haunted and cursed objects. Some of these cursed objects we've had since I've started ghost hunting, you know, almost 20 years ago. And then here are pieces of some of the more famous places we've been able to do investigations of around the country. One of my favorite places I've ever been is St. Augustine, Florida, where it's the oldest continually inhabited place in America. The Spaniards settled there in the 1600s, I think, maybe 1400s. And in the 70s, they were doing an archaeological dig on the Fountain of Youth property, and they found evidence of a Native American culture that far predated by thousands of years anyone, or what they thought anyone lived there. So it is the oldest continually inhabited spot in North America.
Okay. Now, have you been to the Myrtles in Louisiana?
Oh yeah, I absolutely love Myrtles. I've been to a few different
I think I
plantations.
recognize. Are these from
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, these two are from Myrtles, and then these two are from the Oak Alley.
Did you experience anything? Because I did not.
Really?
I was there several times, yeah.
So we saw a weird thing in a room, but that was also could have just been hype of the group we were in. Every time we've stayed there, we've not stayed in the main house, we've stayed in the guest house.
Yeah.
Which is also historic, but we've personally never had anything too concrete happen, you know?
Okay. Well,
But
I've
I
heard...
love just going because it's a beautiful place. You
Oh,
know?
it is beautiful. I think the only weird thing I had happen was it wasn't the first time I had visited. Might have been the second time. I stepped into a fire anthill and I had sandals on, and that was awful.
Yeah.
And so I'm just gonna say that was my experience.
Yeah.
But it's, I mean,
Chloe set those off.
yeah. She's like, girl, you're not allowed to come in here. No.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love going, but again, it's one of those, I appreciate the history and the folklore and the stories as much as me having my own personal experiences.
Right.
So even if I go, it's not like at this point in my life, I do a tourist version of investigating, because like I said, when I started, my point was to prove to myself and others that these things are real. And that's no longer, I already believe in them now, and I already fully accept that I cannot force anyone else to believe in these things.
Right.
So,
I think until you have a personal experience that, no matter how clinical you are in your, in your mind trying to organize it and make sense of it, that you literally can't dismiss what happened, but you can't define what happened.
Yeah.
Because I've known some serious skeptics, but where I come from, we all could see and hear and experience things and communicate. So
yeah. And I've always, like, growing up, like I said, doing ghost hunting, like, I didn't believe in the ghost hunting shows, and we're doing them not only to disprove them, but it comes from a point like Fox Mulder. Like, I wanted to believe in them. Like, I want this to be real, and so that's what I'm looking for, you know? And it's not like you can get caught in that to where you think you're going to see this, so you absolutely do. But there is also, like I said, the precedent that if you are primed to experience a phenomena in this regard and the conditions are right, you could experience it. You know?
Right.
And a skeptic would just say that's your own mind doing that. But I think it's so much more complicated than the way we've ever thought about it. You know, even ghost hunting shows, like I said, are so clinical about, like, oh well, we get a report of a woman in a bonnet. oh, and then from our research in 1882, a woman in a bonnet lived here, must be her. And it's like,
Yeah.
is it? Or is it you show up thinking this is what you're going to find,
Right.
and this is what you find? There's a story, I can't remember, Stanford or someone, a bunch of parapsychologists from a qualified, like a good university, did a psycho experiment where they rented a house, and for 6 months, they came up with the idea of a man named Philip. And Philip lived here, and this is what Philip did for a living, and this is how Philip died, and Philip's ghost can still be seen in this house, specifically doing this and this and this. And for 6 months, they lived in this house and thought of Philip and tried to interact with Philip and just imprint the idea of Philip on this house. And again, it's a completely made up by them story. And then they move out of the house and start renting it out to ghost hunters and say, this is a haunted house. Things have happened here. Tell us what you experienced. Mm-hmm. And team after team found evidence of a spirit named Philip that lived in this house and that did these things that they said he did.
Yeah.
And like showed his equipment or his presence in these ways.
Right.
And so I don't think that means, like, they didn't know that this experiment was going on.
Right.
So I don't think that means that the people putting on the experiments tricked them. I don't think that means that these people are looking for things that they didn't think were there and found this.
Right.
I think it just means it's all so much more complicated than we could ever guess.
Well, if you fill a space with that much energy where that's what you're talking about, thinking about,
exactly.
You're leaving that in your wake when you leave,
exactly.
right? So, yeah, I mean, information travels in waves over, we've established that, like sound travels in waves, light travels in waves, energy travels as well.
Exactly.
And so who's to say it's just not an echo of what was already there?
Yeah, there's another story I love. I don't remember any of the specifics right now, but a guy lived in his house his whole life until he was like 60-something. It's the same house. He lived there forever. It was his house. And then in his 60s, he moved out to another place. And someone else bought the house and moved in that didn't know him. Yeah. And while they were living there, they saw what they called the ghost of the previous resident. This guy opening cabinets and going through his morning routine and stuff.
Right.
And he was still alive miles away.
Right.
So it's not like it's his conscious energy that's interacting with him. It's the imprint of 60 years of life in his home, you know?
Right.
And so, again, that in my opinion, doesn't mean that ghosts definitely aren't spirits of other people, and they definitely aren't, conscious. I think that's just an illustration of how little we know about everything we're looking.
Right. Well, I mean, as humans, we only use we don't even use our brain to its 100% capacity.
Yeah.
So what are we missing?
Yeah, the majority of the brain just does the automatic things, and we can't use it.
We're not conscious of. Everything,
we can't use it to the capacity that we think we should be able to. It's all doing stuff, but most of it's unconscious, like regulation of body temperature and stuff that we can't use.
Yeah.
So it's just fun. It's. Of course there's things that we don't understand, Birds can see magnetic fields and we can't. That doesn't mean that they're not there, or that if you believe in magnetic fields you are a ghost hunter,
Yeah.
It just means that we know for a fact that we can, people say we have 5 senses. We have many more than 5 senses. We have 20. We can tell our ears pop when pressure changes. We can tell there's over 20 senses we have. There's the 5 main ones, and then so many other ones.
There are.
And what's to know, there's been a study that, and this is a little dark, but there's been a study with military snipers that have, taken the lives of their targets from hundreds of yards away, and time after time, they report that when they get the person in their crosshairs, the person starts being shifting and telling that someone's staring at them.
Right.
They can, from 500 yards away, can sense that someone is focusing on them.
Right, and it's that sensation is an unusual because it's not like a physical sensation of being brushed against.
Yeah.
and it's not something you're seeing, not even something you're hearing. It's just
and we just,
but you still kind of feel it in some sort of way inside, like a tingle or
and we just brush it off as like, folklore of like, oh, a goose walked over my grave, or I just feel like someone's staring at me, and then brush that off because logically there's not a way to know that someone's staring at you.
Right.
But everyone in the world has experienced it, and there have been scientific studies like by the snipers and stuff that yes, there is a tangible like difference when you're being observed.
Right.
Well, even the wave particle theory that when we're looking at atoms, they perform as a particle, and when we're not looking at them, they perform as a wave, and that is genuine science that like an outside observer affects what happens just by observing,
Right.
And so I think that absolutely is intrinsic to all of the weird stuff that we're trying to do as paranormal investigators, or just someone that likes to read energies, or whatever you do that seems like it's hoo-ha. It's obviously just something that we don't fully understand. That doesn't mean that it's fake. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily real. But it means that there's the scientific process of doing this, and it's showing the same repeated results just isn't applicable to this.
Yeah, some things you cannot apply the scientific method to.
Exactly.
It's almost impossible to measure, such as people being able to communicate. So like I can hear my sister.
Yeah.
She lives hours away from me, and I will be like, please, what is your issue? I will call her, and it freaks her out. I'll be like, I can hear you. What's going on? I'm tired. Please go to bed. And it freaks her out, but it's how do you measure that?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, besides the fact that she completely would come in here and be like, yes, she does that, and it's weird.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
Uri Geller is one of the most studied mentalists in forever, A lot of mentalists will say that what they do is just observation, like the amazing Kreskin. He says flat out that everything he does is just mentalism. It's like a magician doing stuff, that he's not using any powers. However, I've seen him do things. I saw him, he was like 84 when I saw him perform, and he ends every show anymore where they give him his check for his thing, and then he leaves the room after picking 5 random audience members. I actually got to be one of them the time I saw him. He gives us his check and says, I'm leaving the room for 10 minutes, hide it wherever you want, and if I can't find that check, I don't get paid tonight, and we donate that to this charity.
Yeah.
And he has done that 5,000 times, something like that. And he said that he can count the amount of times that he's not found his check on his hands.
Yeah.
And so I see him, he gives us his check, and then he leaves. And then we picked some random guy standing at the very back of the auditorium and put it in his left shoe.
Yeah.
And Creston comes back in, and he does, so logically I can figure out some of this. But so he'll grab one of us that helped hide it, and he holds a handkerchief and walks around the room, and then we hold the other side of the handkerchief and follow him. And so I logically get that if I know that the check's hidden here, and I'm following him like that, and he turns this way, I know logically I'm gonna kind of go that way. So I get that how you could find an area where it is, but within 10 minutes, he only used 2 of us 5 people that hit it. Within 10 minutes, he had found the check. And with the first guy, within 3 minutes, he went over to the guy that was holding it and couldn't find it in his shoe. But he was like doing an energy study of him, and he couldn't find it. So he got another person, and with the other person, he went directly to that person and then said, "Can you take off your left shoe, please?" And it was in their shoe. And so part of that is absolutely human study, but what is the rest of it?
Well, it's interesting that you talk about that. Earlier we were chatting about magicians and stuff before we started rolling, and I told you about interviewing a mentalist for that first episode of the show.
Yeah.
And he blew my mind. So I get what you're saying there, because for certain things I can kind of see, because he ran me through a couple of things. But he told me my mother-in-law's name, her first name, and I'm going, there is no way he could have known this because she lives halfway across the country. We never spoke about her. Like, I have no pictures of her hanging in the room because we were actually in my library at my house. No, so that he wouldn't have seen a picture. He wouldn't have seen any kind of mail laying out because I actually cleaned before he came over, so I wouldn't be embarrassed, So I was like, how did he even come up with the name?
Yeah.
So it was very odd.
Yeah, and I don't, and that's someone, I don't know about him personally, but like I said, Kreskin will say, no, this is all just from studying humans. And it's like, is it? Like, you may think it is, but are you not also tuning your subconscious into these wavelengths, and you've done this for 70 years of your life?
Right.
Do you not think that maybe you're able to pick up on things that no one else could?
Right, right.
And but Uri Geller's different because Uri Geller does say that it is all a power given to him. And he's been disproven time and time again by the Amazing Randy or whatever. But also, again, a lot of these things are, if I'm talking with a ghost, and I absolutely believe I'm talking with a ghost, and then you come in and you think there's no way this dude is talking, he's crazy, then is that thing still going to interact in the same way, especially if it's using the energy of me talking to it, and then someone else comes in and blocks that? Does that mean that person's right, that no, I wasn't talking to a ghost?
Right.
I don't know. It's just, no. I'm not saying that
I think the
know
world and
what's
the
going
universe and the humans are still so very complex that we will, not at least in this lifetime, and probably not in many, many more lifetimes, I don't think we'll ever have a true grasp of all there is to know.
Yeah.
And especially now that we're pulling in with AI, so eventually it's going to get to the point of, oh, so maybe what is real and what isn't real.
Yeah.
It's like we're starting to blur those lines.
Exactly, yeah.
Anyway, so it's just going to become more complex. It's just kind of like how the universe keeps expanding, so does the amount of material that we will struggle to understand.
Yeah, exactly. And I absolutely believe in black and white truths. The sky is blue. Humans deserve equality and freedom. I believe that there's objective yeses and nos. The earth is not flat. The earth is absolutely round.
Right.
But I also think that so much stuff isn't objective. That even that we think about, and I mean, not to get political, but think about the world that reality lives in right now is all about fake news, and I refuse to believe these facts because I believe these facts. I'm not looking for someone to educate me. I'm looking for someone to agree with me,
Right.
So I'm not saying, I'm trying to be as apolitical, saying all that as possible. I'm not saying any side does that specifically. I'm just saying that there's a lot of propaganda that people logically know is propaganda, but choose to believe over an objective truth.
Right.
And so think about, what does truth mean in a world where you choose to not believe it, as you choose to not agree with someone's opinion,
Right.
And so your truth, absolutely, there is an objective, definite truth, a truth that maybe isn't what you believe in, so you don't subscribe to that truth. But your truth, even if it's wrong, even if you believe the world's flat, is still true to you,
Right.
And it's hard to, I don't know. I definitely think that there's absolute rights and wrongs in behavior and ways that society should operate, but I think that the vast majority of it is just,
Right, right.
But yeah, think about all the up in the air stuff, and if we can't even decide if this politician has actually said something or if it was an AI fake, then who's to say that I'm not, talking to Bigfoot and have a Bigfoot that I'm leaving sandwiches for?
Right.
Woods,
Right.
So I don't know. It's just, it's all just so much more complicated than reality, normality makes it sound, or even ghost hunting shows or anything. Because, finding Bigfoot is a very fun entertainment program, but again, they believe that what is Bigfoot is defined by these laws, and you can't change that,
Right.
And
right.
I don't know, like you have to open your mind to be able to, if you believe one thing, you don't have to necessarily believe another thing, but you have to accept that they might be related, you know?
Yeah. Well, Kyle, thank you so much for meeting with me today. This was a fantastic tour, and I encourage everybody to come down to Somerset and get a tour of the museum. It's a great place, lots of information, wonderful tour guide.
Thank you.
Now, you said you have a podcast called
Penny Royal. It's a season by season. We're working on season 3 now.
Okay.
And it's basically me and my friends Darren and Nathan, who are all local here to Pulaski County, and us really diving into the weirdness of Pulaski County, which is not only just like ghosts and flying stingrays that have been seen and stuff like that, but is also like we've had weird conspiracies and cult activity and groups that worship old gods and stuff, and we kind of just go over all the research that we find about these weird people and weird characters in the area.
Right.
But yeah, Penny Royal.
Penny Royal. And where can they find us?
Everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Podbean, all of those.
Okay.
So.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you again. And I'm looking forward to sharing this with everybody.
Of course.
I'll grab a few pictures before I get out of here because I like to do a little 2D, a little 3D. So this episode, Strangers, as you know, if there's video, it goes on YouTube. I'll put snippets on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and then of course the podcast version, just like Kyle's show. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. Strange Bluegrass is a Low Light Publishing LLC production. Copyright 2022. All rights are reserved.